now listen, I'm super excited. I'm always super excited for, the OZ. I'm super excited for everything comes out. But you know what I'm also super excited for?
What are you excited for?
Listen, I've held on. I've held on a long time for this because let's be honest, I'm sure you get tired of hearing me pontificate once a month when I review
Oh,
the glorious book that is known as Space Ghost. And I say things like I always mention how it's the and I mean this, it is for your money the best comic on the shelves
kind of you.
as an ongoing series. And I
Yeah.
also mean the fact, and we'll probably talk about this a little bit here, that nobody, and I mean nobody, writes human drama like you, sir. I
Ooh,
appreciate it immensely. Uh,
that's very
speak, Speaking of which, though,
yeah.
we are coming to the end of volume two.
Yes, we are.
So the volume two end of Space Ghost is coming up pretty rapidly upon us,
Yes, it is.
and of course, it has been glorious, just like volume one was. And so, listen, let's dive right into it. Like, what can we expect? What can we talk about coming into the close? Because, like I said, we're coming into the annual and the close.
Yeah, as you rightly noted, we're wrapping up Space Ghost Volume 2 with our annual that is up for pre-orders right now. Call your local comic shop
Mhm.
because, yeah, Space Ghost really feels like the little engine that could. I feel like that is a book that, we talk about rolling the dice on things. You write these things in isolation, you have no idea how they're going to land. Everything is sort of a calculated risk. And so Space Ghost, um, for those who haven't read it, I sort of pitch that book as like Batman: The Long Halloween meets The Mandalorian. It's not coast to coast. It is sort of bringing Space Ghost back to his like classic superhero roots, but kind of told through modern storytelling techniques and through kind of a modernized lens. I sort of always kind of try to compare it to the first J.J. Abrams Star Trek movie, where I was not like I was too young to obviously like have any affection for like Kirk and Spock from the original, but when I watched that movie, I was like, oh, I get it. Okay, this makes a lot of sense to me. Who these characters are, and it felt very modern and fresh and immediate. And so that's something that I kind of try to do with Space Ghost and his sort of ongoing his evolving dynamic with these two teenage orphans, Jan and Jace, that he takes under his wing, and how they become sort of, he eventually trains them to become his partners, and then sort of eventually this kind of found family dynamic that's been evolving as they battle sort of the villain of the month. First sort of the villains of the Council of Doom, and then eventually Tempest, the Time Master, and sort of his collection of kind of time tossed villains. And so we've been building up to this for a long time. Space Ghost issue 12 is coming out in June, and that is going to sort of be the big climax of our Tempest the Time Master storyline. And we've got some real fun stuff coming with that issue. We've sort of established that Tempest, he's been lurking in the shadows through most of our second volume. And we found out in this previous issue, he's been hunting space ghosts across the multiverse and sort of absorbing their energy to power his machine called the Time Shredder, which he is going to use to sort of rewrite reality to his whims. He's been stomping around the multiverse for a while. You're going to see in Space Ghost issue 12 what happens when the multiverse strikes back. And we've got some real fun twists coming in this that you won't see coming, but if you're a diehard Space Ghost fan, you're definitely going to be excited. But even if you're not, you're going to be like, oh, wow, okay. You're gonna dig back into the Wikipedia, I'm sure. But our Space Ghost annual is, a really fun kind of way of tying up a nice bow on volume 2. Volume 1 with Space Ghost, we had a pretty firm runway already planned for that. When Dynamite first approached me, they said, let's do a year. And I said, could we do 12 in an annual? And they said, sure, sounds good. So I knew for the moment I started writing issue 1 that I had a 13 issue runway for that. And so I was able to kind of really plan accordingly. Around issue 10 of volume 1, I was writing our Space Spectre issue, which was sort of like, I pitched it as Space Ghost versus Dark Knight Returns Space Ghost. Sort of a fun Terminator style time travel thing. Days of Future Past kind of thing, where we found out that Space Spectre, this dark future version of Space Ghost, we find out it's actually the future version of Jace, who has sort of come from this like horrific dystopian future to try to stop that from happening. And Space Ghost winds up having to foil his well-intentioned plans. As we got to that issue, I started to think, and Dynamite started to think, maybe there's more stories that can be told here. And so I started to kind of like tease some breadcrumbs. We started talking about Tempest the Time Master in that issue a little bit. But we did not have a firm runway on that. My editor, Joe Ryban, at first was like, what about another 5 issues? And I said, well, I can do 5. Of course, I'm a professional. I can make anything work. But I was like, we spent 13 issues building up to the Council of Doom. Or I guess we had spent 10 issues and then they showed up by issue 11. So 10 issues building up to the big villains of the piece. 5 issues to build up to Tempest. Like, it's not a lot of runway for me to work with. I was like, what if we had, I think I had said 7 or 8. Because I then we could do something interesting with the twins, in that we could introduce their grandfather, Dr. Henry Contra, who's sort of he becomes this Jekyll and Hyde villain known as the Antimatter Man. He gets hit with like an antimatter beam, and it gives him sort of an evil, dangerous personality. And so I was like, oh, we could make him like the Harvey Dent of our book, of the twins. The fantasy of Space Ghost, when you really boil it down, and the reason why it was so enduring when it first came out, is you can be his sidekick. You can go into space and you can fight supervillains and save the day with this cool looking, superhero. And you can fly around in the Phantom Cruiser, and you got a fun monkey as a pet. That's the reason why they had both a boy sidekick and a girl sidekick, is that anybody watching that show could kind of project. And so if the fantasy is you can go and be a superhero in space, I thought, what better way to kind of subvert that fantasy than to say, what happens when your parents come home, and say, we're plucking you out of the fantasy. And so I said, we could do a really cool subplot with Dr. Contra that would really kind of like break some hearts. And so we started working on, I think it was 8 issues. But around the time I think I started issue 3 of the second volume, Joe already came back to me. He was like, I think we should do a little bit more. And so I think we added on like another 2 or 3 issues to that. And right around by the time I finished issue 5 with our Space Sharks versus the Crystalline Empire 2-parter, it was right around San Diego Comic-Con. I was about to start issue 6, and I was like, I said, Joe, if I had 2 more, I could introduce the space vampires and I could introduce the sorceress. And Joe was like, yeah, sure. Okay, go for it. So the run kept expanding sort of as like I was sort of placing track down while I was still on the train. And this annual was sort of like the cherry on top for all of that. In that issue 12 of Space Ghost Volume 2 is extra sized because that was originally going to be the end of the run. And it was just before I started writing issue 12 that Joe came back to me and he said, listen, Space Ghost Volume 1 was 13 issues, and right now we only have 12. I would really like it if we did a 13th. I remember thinking like, I was, at first I was sort of at a loss for words because we were already about to wrap Tempest the Time Master, and I was like, what am I going to do? And so I kind of, went in my office for a little bit and sort of, screamed at the heavens and pulled my hair out for a little bit. And then I was like, you know what, actually, this is great. This builds up a lot more room for me to really kind of explore the emotional side of Space Ghost. And really kind of wrap this second volume in a way that really does justice to the stories we've been telling. And so our annual that's coming out, without spoiling too much, Space Ghost is kind of dealing with the aftermath of Tempest the Time Master. I don't think it's spoiling too much to say that like he has saved the day, but it's come at a cost. Space Ghost, really the whole engine that drives the series has been this tension, this push and pull between him being a superhero and him being a surrogate father figure to Jan and Jason. He's managed to kind of strike an uneasy balance between the two. But by the time that Space Ghost issue 12 comes out, that balance is going to get blown up in a big way. And so Space Ghost Annual is kind of a bookend to the first issue of Volume 2, which started off with a conversation. That first issue of Volume 2 was Jan and Jace meeting their grandfather for the first time and explaining to him why the universe needs a Space Ghost, but more importantly, why the man behind the mask is so important to them. And we sort of intercut it with Space Ghost having his own adventure, fighting Tempest's lieutenant, the Toymaker. And meanwhile, kind of in his feelings about, I don't know if I'm going to have these kids in my life for much longer. So we've seen these characters have their dark nights of the soul. Jace had a big one in our first volume when he thought he killed Zorak. Jan had one in a recent issue after Dr. Contra died. Now we get to see Space Ghost have that. And so he's going to have a conversation sort of in response to that first issue with a very unexpected figure of sort of this idea of like, does the universe need a Space Ghost? And meanwhile, we're going to intercut this with sort of an adventure that has pushed Space Ghost to the emotional brink. We have a really fun villain, Magnus, who he's a thief who likes to steal, industrial equipment. And he's been stealing from salvage planets in the wake of Tempest's rampage. And he has stolen something that is particularly volatile that could cause a lot of catastrophic human life if it's not handled properly and returned promptly. He also has a partner who's this mysterious reality warping alien who's sort of like the heavy that sort of allowed Magnus to go on this crime spree. Magnus himself is kind of like the stilt man of the Space Ghost universe. He's got these telescoping legs and telescoping arms, so there's a little bit of Dr. Octopus to him as well. So Space Ghost and the twins are going to have to like figure out like, how do we stop this guy before it's too late? And Magnus and the alien have a secret. And when Space Ghost faces that, it's going to really hit him where he lives. And that's going to sort of put him on this, long, dark night of the soul. And so it really is kind of our way of like honoring the emotional arc of Space Ghost in that, at the end of the day, it's the twins that sort of make his life worth living, that give him that sense of humanity that he's buried down so deep after the passing of his wife and daughter. So that said, I'm kind of bearing the lead a little bit in that this annual also teases what we've got coming next after Space Ghost Volume 2. Jonathan Lau and I are not going anywhere on this book. Just so in case anybody was wondering, we are on this book for the long haul. My goal, I don't know if we'll get there, but if we don't get there, we'll be within spitting distance of getting there. Is I want to get us to 50 issues. I think we can do it. As long, as if people keep reading it, we'll keep writing it. But that's the goal, and I think it can be attained.
I pray for 50 issues.
Yes.
Or more.
No, I was going to say, if our team is any reflection of that, trust us, you will definitely get to 50 issues, maybe 100. Just putting the karma out there.
But what I can say, because they've said it in this list, is that this annual is going to tee up our big upcoming Space Ghost event that's going to kick off in September, where we're going to be bringing the Herculoids into the mix. Alex Toth's other sci-fi space adventure team. And that's something I've been hankering to do for a long time. I watched every episode of Space Ghost when I started prep work on this series, and not just the original series, but also the 80s revival and Space Stars. And what I love so much about Space Stars is that was the team up show. And so you would have standalone episodes, with Space Ghost, but you would also, every episode had a team up. So you'd see Space Ghost with the Herculoids, or Space Ghost with the Teen Force. And so that was kind of like that was something I really wanted to do for a long time. And so as we were sort of approaching the end zone for Space Ghost Volume 2, I asked Joe Ryban, I said, listen, I would like to do more Space Ghost. There's one structural hurdle, which is we are starting to run a little low on villains. We've used so many, we've burned through them at kind of an alarming pace. But there's so many cool things to explore that we've been very enthusiastic, and we wanted to make sure we've covered as much ground as we could. I was like, there are some villains that are interesting, but what if we introduce the Herculoids into the mix, and then we can kind of cross pollinate? So I watched every episode of the Herculoids to prep for this, same way that I did with Space Ghost. Again, it's sort of it feels a little like force feeding myself. Like, my brain feels like a little like overstuffed while I'm doing it, but it's my way of sort of figuring, identifying the landmarks of the continuity of it all. Who are the important characters, who are the important villains, who's showing up multiple times, so you can kind of give them a little bit more weight. But also identifying trends and themes that sort of pop up in the aggregate that the animators weren't necessarily thinking about when they made the show, because at the time they were flying by the seat of their pants. They were just like, how do we get the show done on time and under budget? So it was, the Wild West. I have the benefit of hindsight. So I'm able to sort of look back and identify like things that are interesting, but also just like, who are these characters? What are the things that kind of pop up? And so what I wanted to do with Space Ghost and the Herculoids is that Space Ghost is a found family story. What happens when they meet a different kind of family? A family that has their own way of doing things, that may be a little off-putting to them, but also are sort of powerful and strong and undeniably brave in their own right. And seeing kind of like, there are certain things that these families have in common, but there are other things that are very, very different. And sort of where's the overlap and where's the conflict, and what kind of sparks are going to arise out of that. And so, it's sort of the city mouse and the country mouse. Space Ghost is sort of this, superhero who, saves all sorts of worlds across the Galactic Federation. The Herculoids, for those who don't know what that concept is, it's basically like, what if Conan the Barbarian lived in space, married Sheena the She-Devil, or Shanna the She-Devil, had like young teenage Disney Tarzan as their son, and then hung out with 5 interstellar kaiju, and were basically protecting their jungle planet from all sorts of pirates and raiders and industrialists looking to pillage their natural resources. And so, they've got these 5 really fun monsters that they, hang out with all the time. They've got Zoc, the Star Dragon. So, she metabolizes cosmic energy, and she can fire lasers out of her eyes or a negative beam out of her tail. Tundro, who's sort of a triceratops rhinoceros hybrid who can fire projectiles from his serrated horn. And he's got these like kind of armored frills that can, are bulletproof and can, and he's sort of like a living tank. Igu, who's my favorite. He's like if King Kong and Ben Grimm had a baby. Like he's kind of the gregarious of the Herculoids. Like, none of them talk, but like as the rock ape, he's the smartest one. He's the one who is able to actually like turn things into tools. And yet he's also the one with a sense of humor. He's the one who's always like laughing at things, and he's always goofing off with Xandor's son Dorno. But if you mess with his humans, gloves are off.
Yeah.
And he's got this amazing sense of agility that you wouldn't expect from a creature that size. But if you put him in an urban environment, he's suddenly like scaling buildings and like leaping into the air and really like has a surprising sense of speed. And he loves Xandor's wife Tara. I sort of see their dynamic as if like Fey Ray and King Kong actually worked out.
Mhm.
And then finally, my two of my favorites, and the ones who I think really establish who the Herculoids are as characters, which are Gloop and Gleep, or as they're called in the TV show, the Formless Fearless Wonders.
Yeah.
It is a green protoplasm, and it's smaller green protoplasmic clone. It's like if Flubber could kill you. Um, I, and I love these characters in particular because all the other ones, there you can kind of get a sense of what they are as we tend to anthropomorphize animals, in general. You can really see kind of the soul behind the rest of those Herculoids. These creatures are inscrutable, and at the same time, there's this sort of deep core of of love and loyalty, even to these bizarre, creepy looking protoplasms in our continuity. The day that Xandor and Tara had their son, Dorno, Gloop, the bigger protoplasm, splits off into a younger clone as sort of this act of solidarity to give this baby sort of a lifelong protector and pet. And so at the same time, you get having these two things, these creepy things as pets, adds a little bit of like an Addams Family weirdness to these otherwise like played pretty straight, like noble savages in space. Is that like if you have these two things as your animals, as your pets, there's something like a little different, a little alien about you. You're certainly not from around here. And so, yeah, like we've sort of taken what Tom Snignowski did in his 10-issue run on the Herculoids, and we sort of expanded on that sort of backstory and that mythology in the same way that we did for Space Ghost. And so, Xandor, the space barbarian, the patriarch of the family, there is an episode from the original series called The Gladiators of Kyanite. And that wound up sort of being, it was one of the last episodes I watched. And thank goodness I watched it because it really kind of opened up my third eye for the whole thing. Is that as a boy, Xandor was captured by the legionnaires of Emperor Neron and forced to fight in the gladiator pits as the gladiator of Kyanite. And so he and his battle beast Tundro kind of, they learned the art of war, having to fight for their lives, week in and week out. One day they were forced to fight Emperor Neron's monster, an enslaved Gloop. And things were not going great for poor Xandor and poor Tundro. Luckily for all of them, that's when the arena was crashed by a young priestess from the Rock Village by the name of Tara, who was sort of raised by Igu and then brought to the Rock Village and raised by the elder Corsac. And, she's kind of like, I see that there's injustice on this planet. I'm going to fight against it. And so she rescues Xandor and sort of gives him this new lease on life. And so Xandor and Space Ghost really do have a lot in common, in that they both sort of have this kind of well of sort of rage and trauma and pain. But Xandor's managed to kind of cover it over. He's gotten his second chance thanks to this family that he's built. Tara has sort of taught him that the planet of Amzad is more than just death and pain and misery, that there's great beauty to it, and that there are people and creatures worth fighting for, and a family worth fighting for. And it's given him a new sense of purpose. What I will say is that when our event starts in September, something has happened to Xandor that has made him backslide in a big way. Channeling a lot of like Namor the Submariner for this characterization. And that is, he and Space Ghost are not going to necessarily see eye to eye when they first meet. It's very much kind of a Batman Superman sort of dynamic. Space Ghost is used to being the toughest guy in the room. And there's a little bit of, he does have a little bit of sense of a pride in that.
Mm-hmm.
Xandor's not from around here. Yeah. And he ain't buying what Space Ghost is selling, especially because due to Xandor and Tara and Dorno's unique physiology, as well as the rest of the Herculoids, they can metabolize trace elements from Amzat's ecosystem called quasarite, which is sort of it's the energy rocks from the original cartoon. They're rocks that sort of, they're explosive, but they also contain kind of this high potential energy. And that has sort of made the planet of Amazon, it's put a target on that whole planet's back. Everybody wants a piece of Quasarite. And meanwhile, the Herculoids, that's sort of, it's so I wrote it in my pitch is it's reverse kryptonite, essentially.
Okay.
It's if you absorb it into your system, it makes you strong, makes you tough. It can, if you're not used to it, it can make you aggressive. And so Quasarite making its way into the greater galaxy is going to make things real complicated for Space Ghost and company. That is sort of where Space Ghost and the Herculoids are going to sort of finally meet. And so, yeah, we're really going for like, this is a big blockbuster kind of action event. This is our longest form storytelling that we're kicking off in September. Previously we've done mostly done in ones and done in twos, with the occasional 3-parter to sort of, bring things home. This is our first experiment with like longer form storytelling in the Space Ghost universe, because we've had so much time to get invested with Space Ghost. So we wanted to make sure that this story introducing the Herculoids and me and Jonathan's take on them felt big and sweeping and epic, and really kind of showed that the Herculoids can hang, that they can go toe to toe with a team, a well-oiled team like Space Ghost and Jan and Jace. And so Jonathan Lau is continuing on the book as well. I have said I wouldn't want to continue on this book without him. This is just as much his baby as it is mine. I can tell you, having seen the first issue of our event, having seen what he's done in our annual, Jonathan is really like going above and beyond on this. His take on the Herculoids is sensational. I can't wait for people to see it. We got a page where like Xandor and Tara, I was like, whoa, like those two they're active, we'll just say. Those two are super into each other, and I think that like speaks to the kind of Leonidas and Gorgo kind of dynamic that I wrote for them. So I'm really proud of this book, and it's going to kind of ease us into sort of the next era of Space Ghost stories that Jonathan and I are going to be telling. But like I said, we're not going anywhere. We're on this book for the long haul. Dynamite's been very happy with it. Warner Brothers has been very happy with it. I've been very happy working with both our creative team and Dynamite and our licensors on it. It really, and I want to give a special shout out to our licensors at Warner Brothers, particularly Megan Logan over there, who has she's been a champion for us from the very beginning. Warner Brothers has, they've gone above and beyond and really letting us tell the best and biggest possible story for Space Ghost. They've given us dispensation that they did not need to give us, but because they believe in the take that Jonathan and I are doing, they have allowed us to kind of go even further than what the license necessarily legally mandates. So there's some fun stuff coming for all of that, some big swing stuff. But yeah, Space Ghost universe is about to get a whole lot bigger. And you're going to see the beginnings of that in Space Ghost Annual coming out in July. So call your local comic shop, add it to your pull list, and then in September, add the Space Ghost event to your pull list. It'll be 5 issues. We'll take another gap month after that, and then I believe in March we'll start the next round of Space Ghost stories.
I just made my night.
Yep.
Yes. Yes. That's all I'm going to say. It just made my night. I do love Space Ghost. Not like it's funny because I really do buy. It's on my pull list. I have every issue. Then I also buy the trade. So it's kind of
my hero, man. I appreciate it.
It might almost be an obsession. Mind you, I get to read these all wonderfully early, so I will make that humble brag. So,
but it's well worth going out and buying the issues and buying the trades. Like I say, it's no lip service here. We go out, we support it, and every time the issues come out for whether it's Space Ghost or Speed Racer, I'm getting messaged by my entire team like, I want to cover it. And it's like, that's why I say you get the video and you get the written, because we support it and we just think it's so amazing. And like I said, I'm glad I got a coat on, because otherwise you see the goosebumps coming on my arm when I'm hearing about the event coming out, because I'm I'm like, where is the code right now? And I'm trying to like remain calm instead of just going right and just calling my LCS up right now.
I was gonna say, like, as far as the review things, I would have given you the whole, the from my cold dead hands.
I get it from you and Joey both.
We will have the pre-order codes for our Space Coast event in about a month's time. I almost jumped the gun on it this week. I misread the email from Dynamite saying what month of solicits were coming out this week. So I jumped the gun a little bit. But September solicits, we will have the pre-order codes for our Space Coast event for the first issue of that. So stay tuned. I'm about halfway finished writing it. We are pushing Jonathan's action chops to the absolute limit, and he is going above and beyond. So definitely stay tuned. It's going to be fun stuff.
Speaking of above and beyond, you've definitely gone above and beyond with us. But I know Ken mentioned it. We would be remiss if we did not mention the other ongoing that you currently have. Of course, that would be Speed Racer, which is also tremendous and phenomenal. Listen, we just kicked off the newest arc. It's we're a couple issues in. And it's once again just continuing to be great. There's some more thoughts on Speed Racer. What would we have in store for us as this continues on?
Well, I'm really excited for the stories we've got coming down the pike for Speed Racer. We just hit the midway point for sort of our second arc, which is also kind of the midway point for sort of that first 16 issues that I had committed to when I took on the book. But I really enjoyed the response to our Great Mammoth Car issue, our sort of done in one will they or won't they story with Speed and Trixie. I knowing that we were sort of at the halfway point of those preliminary plans, I was kind of like, I want to give retailers an issue of Speed Racer that they can hand to anybody who's missed the book. To say, listen, you want like one issue that like sums up the whole thing. This is it. And so we've got a really fun 2-part story that's going to be kicking off in June that we're calling Demon on Wheels. And this is sort of, our first 6 issues was sort of the table setting of sort of, getting Speed from being sort of competing in back alley races to becoming a Formula X champion in the making, and meeting his supporting cast of Trixie and Racer X and sort of dealing with the fallout of Pops's heart attack. Our second arc has really been kind of adding complications to the mix, whether it's the GRX engine and sort of the ghosts of Pop's Racer's past coming to haunt Speed, and then the Great Mammoth Car. We've got, Demon on Wheels is sort of, I pitched it as the Batman storyline Venom for Speed Racer. Speed winds up getting exposed to a street drug known as V-gas, which kind of gives people sort of enhanced, speed and strength and aggression. There have been Formula X drivers using it as a performance enhancer. And when Speed is unwittingly exposed to it, we get to see Speed with the gloves off. This is, he's fearless now, but he's also, hyper aggressive, and heaven help any other drivers that get in his way. And so we're going to see, starting in issue 9, Speed's family and supporting cast is going to be caught way off guard by all of this. And so we see Speed, we're going to see Speed kick some serious ass in issue 9. We've got a beat in that issue. Davide Tinto is such a talented artist. I wrote in the script, there's one direction where I said the Mach 5 uppercuts a car. And Dave just, he pulled it off. It looks great. But yeah, it's sort of this 2-parter is really, this is very much a story about how Speed is all this raw potential, all this unpolished talent. And the only way he's going to make it across the finish line is through the aid of his supporting cast, of all the lessons he's going to learn, all the insights and perspective that everybody brings to the table. Now that supporting cast is going to be put to the test. Like, can they sort of pull Speed back from the brink before he does something that they can't take back? And so Yeah, it's kind of fun. Speed. I love writing Speed Racer because he is a character who's driven by passion, and I love that about him. But he's also a very flawed character. He's got a lot of growing.
Yeah.
There's a lot of lessons for him to learn. He's young and headstrong and impetuous and sometimes reckless. He's very confident in himself. And sometimes life needs to knock him down a peg or two. And so I think a story like this really speaks to that theme of like Speed's high in his own supply, and it's not necessarily his fault. He doesn't, in this case, he's not even 100% able to wrap his head around what's happened to him. Everybody's sort of catching up with this stuff, as it's happening. And meanwhile, we've got a nice thread that sort of is a nod to Racer X's past, in that the V-Gas kind of has a tie to where he's come from. In particular, the days when he trained in the jungles of Capetapec. That's sort of, maybe someday that's a story I'll be able to actually, explore in greater detail. That was something that we talked very briefly during the development phase, that might have appeared in Racer X, and Mark wound up going in a different direction with it, so we didn't address it. But I love that bit of Racer X's history that they had in the original cartoons, is that he trained under this mysterious driver named Prince Kabbalah, in this sort of remote jungle country of Capetapec, and V-Gas has a connection to Capetapec, and so Racer X is kind of the only one who knows what's in store for Speed, and so in issue 10 he's gonna have to intervene, and so I'll spoil it here. It's going to be Speed Racer versus Racer X.
Ooh,
and
there it is.
And so that's going to sort of be like kind of the big sort of climax for our second arc, and that'll lead us to arc 3. I believe there's a gap between arcs 2 and 3. I don't know exactly. I think it might be a couple of months. And that's Mad Cave likes to do that basically just so everybody can get caught up, both the readers and us as the creative team, so we don't burn Dave out, so we can keep him consistent on the book. I'm very excited for what we've got planned in arc 3. I'm in the middle of writing that right now. We're bringing a fan favorite Speed Racer villain onto the scene, the Melange, which is the way I like in the Melange is it's sort of like an evil version of Racer X, in that this is a mysterious driver who has roots in Formula X history, that every time a driver dies under mysterious circumstances, they say the Melange must have gotten them. And so this driver has been hunting down the corrupt figures, the corrupt criminals behind Formula X, and basically executing them one by one. And we see in the opening pages, Racer X does not fare very well against the Melange, and the Palm City police think he's done it. And so Speed is going to have to kind of go on a journey to figure out the secrets of the Melange, and how can he clear Racer X's name. So that's a really fun two-part of the Melange. I love writing that character. I was kind of surprised. I'm in the middle of writing the second part of that right now, but I was just like, every time the Melange would do something, I'm like, that's the coolest thing I've written in this whole book. Just a really fun character with a lot of fun moments to them. And that'll kind of tee us up for our big kind of 3-part finale of sort of our initial plans for the book, which is, the Formula X championships. Over the course of our series, Speed has been on this quest to win the Formula X championship because Pops Racer has a heart attack in our first issue, and he needs a heart transplant. And heart transplants in this country do not come cheap, especially if you don't have insurance. And so they cost $1 million, and that's real, by the way. That's and so where's Speed going to come up with $1 million? He's got to win the Formula X championship. And so the stakes are very high. And meanwhile, Dante Furno, the owner of the car acrobatic team, the head of Alpha Automotive, he had another life before he went corporate as the ruthless driver nicknamed Captain Terror. He was sort of the Red Baron of Formula X. And so we're going to see what happens when Dante Furno is tired of dealing with proxies and what happens when he suits up on the track one more time. He's going to put speed through his paces for sure. So I'm really excited to get cracking on that. I think I'll probably be starting on that sometime next month. But yeah, it's again, I've been really enjoying writing Speed Racer. I think because I think my favorite books are always the ones that I see something of myself in. I think that's how I can kind of engage with it emotionally. Some fun trivia about me is that, for Space Coast, I'm the older brother of triplets. My younger siblings are almost 9 years to the day younger than me.
Oh, wow.
And so it wasn't until I was started writing issue 4 of the first volume of Space Coast that I realized that's what I'm writing about, is that it's the day that I started counting everything in threes. In that I had a good thing going as an only child. I had a system in place. And suddenly I'm the dinosaur watching the meteor come. My whole life kind of blew up. And at first it was just like chaos and screaming. But you kind of learn what the new equilibrium is. And then you find out that these kids are like, they add so much to your life, and that they're sort of the best parts of your life. They make your life worth living. And so that was kind of Space Coast. Speed Racer is the story of my career. That is, Speed is, he's driven by passion. He lives and breathes and eats and sleeps racing. As a comics fan who became a comics journalist, who became a comics professional, I resonate with that quite a bit. In that there's something that is such that is fuel for you. That's something that you're consumed by. And then what happens when you take that passion and you suddenly make the leap of faith and decide to go pro with it? And there's a lot of pressure, and there's a lot of anxiety, and it's a leap of faith, and there's a lot of trials and tribulations and setbacks and failures and comebacks, and the lessons you learn, and all the people along the way that got you across the finish line. Speed Racer, that is a book about my life. And so I love writing that character. And I love, not just writing all the car chases, although I love writing car chases.
Yeah.
But it's just, that is a character who every time I write it, whenever I finish it, it's not over, it's not as overt when I'm writing it. It's only in sort of when I look at it in the rear view, then I'm like, oh yeah, wait, actually, I didn't even think that I was drawing from my life, and yep, actually I just did. So I really, that writing a book like that is a gift, and working with Davide Tinto and Joe Canola and Buddy Bowden, our unsung hero, our amazing letterer on that book. And then, of course, on Space Coast, Jonathan Lau and Andrew Dahlhaus, our amazing colorist, and Taylor Esposito, who's just our amazing bulletproof letterer. Working with these amazing teams has been such a gift. Being able to tell stories over a longer runway has been such a gift, because I think that's something that fans want. I mean, I think there's a world where miniseries, there are certain stories that do need to have like a more concrete beginning, middle, and end. But I think fans, and something I've come to think about a lot lately, is that fans, I think especially the Wednesday Warrior fans, there's a lot more in common with television, and not in terms of the writing by any means. I think in terms of the customer habits, is that they want to be able to know that they can check in month after month after month with the characters that they like, with the creators that they like in terms of their voice, and especially in terms of the art, which is why I've been so lucky to have consistent creative teams on both. Knock on wood that stays the same. And so being able to tell a longer story has been great in terms of being able to sort of establish that rapport with readers in order to build that sense of emotional investment, that sense of trust in us. You don't get to always do that in today's economy, in today's marketplace. You know, and so there are certain things that I love writing as miniseries. I mean, obviously the OZ is a miniseries. You know, I've got another creator-owned mini that I'm about to start in you know, in the coming days. You know, so there is a place for it, but the long tail of a long story, you know, 16 issues on Speed Racer. You know, I'm on 29 issues of Space Ghost and counting. You know, that's a gift. And so I'm very grateful to the teams at Dynamite and very grateful to the teams at Mad Cave that they've trusted me with these characters and sort of given me that latitude and that runway to be able to kind of tell the biggest swing story that I can. And judging by the response to these books, I think that the calculated risk has paid off. And so, you know, everybody does books differently. You know, there are certain financial constraints that certain publishers have for different titles. There's also just different creators do things differently. But I've tried to really take all the lessons that I've picked up in creator-owned work, all the lessons that I've picked up at Marvel. I mean, Space Ghost and Speed Racer subsequently. Space Ghost doesn't exist without Tom Brevoort. You know, that guy really, you know, if Marvel was my medical residency, you know, Tom was the chief resident. You know, like he really drilled some really smart storytelling techniques into me, particularly the done in one approach, but also, you know, I've always tried to lean into emotional storytelling, but the idea of the story has to be about heroes saving the little guy. You know, that being a superhero is not about punching out bad guys. It's about laying your life on the line for somebody who doesn't have powers and somebody who can't fight back in the round. That's what I call it, the Brevoort rule. And you see it in almost every single issue of Space Ghost. You know, that's sort of a core bedrock principle for me now. So yeah, those books, Space Ghost and Speed Racer, are just really special books for me. And you know, one day I'll wrap up on those books, and those are going to be sad days for me because they are really unique and special books to me. And every project feels that way to some extent, but these two, boy, you know, there are certain books that you feel like just your heart is just 100,000% into it. These books for sure.
Yeah. I would say that it would be a sad day for myself and a lot of other people as well. And I will say this, when I've paid the compliment of saying that nobody writes human emotion better than David Pepose, those answers explain exactly why, because you are putting it in there and it comes across perfectly. And I think that that's why, in my opinion, Space Ghost and Speed Racer are such great series, because you're not just looking at the, hey, we have this cool racer, or hey, we have this amazing superhero. You're looking at what makes them tick and what makes them work. And it is very human. It is very emotional. And it's like, oh, wow, it works. So thank you for that, because it's amazing.
Oh, my pleasure. No, thank you for reading it. Yeah, that was a goal I set for myself from my very first book, and I think it's a goal that's always served me well. Is how do I make readers cry? But also just how do I make you feel something? How do I make you give a damn? Because and I feel like I've been pretty pleased with my track record. It's not I haven't always batted 1,000. I mean, listen, I wrote a legacy Punisher. You know, like I know what it's like to be at the eye of the storm of internet controversy. But I feel like at the same time, I would welcome that, because at least you're feeling engaged. Apathy is kind of the thing I don't want. I want people to feel invested. I want people to have conversations about the books. I want people, you know, I'm trying to put myself into these books. You know, I'm trying to really make sure every character has a unique spin on them, a unique twist, something that kind of makes them stand out and kind of hook themselves under your skin a little bit. And so I always welcome when people have thoughts about it, and I think I've been really pleased with the fact that, all of my books have been a tightrope, or so many of them have been, dating back all the way to Spencer and Locke. A book that's what if Calvin and Hobbes grew up in Sin City.
Mhm.
I'm juggling dynamite on that thing. Like that is me making Sacred Cow into less than Sacred Hamburger. And there's always going to be a ratio of people. When I did that first book, I said, there's going to be some people who hate this thing because it exists. And then there's going to be some people who love it for the audacity of it, especially when we can prove we can stick the landing and it's not just shock for shock value's sake.
Mhm.
I don't know what that ratio is going to be. And thankfully, that ratio broke overwhelmingly in our favor. Same thing happened with Space Ghost. But every book is sort of, you're walking out on the tightrope again. And you're sort of like, if I'm going to make a risk, how do I make it a calculated one? How do I sort of plan ahead in terms of what, what could a potential naysayer say about all this? I write every book through the eyes of my days as a comics critic. And sometimes my collaborators want to wring my neck over it, because I look at everything and I say, if I was still a reviewer, what would I say about this? And sometimes I'm always trying to go the extra mile. Sometimes it's an extra mile too many. But at the end of the day, the work is going to endure.
Mhm.
Even if there was some headaches on my part along the way, the work is what matters. The work is what you're going to see. The work is what the readers are going to see. And I talk about this a lot lately, is that we are in a business where trust needs to be earned.
Mhm.
In and month out, it is hard to come by. We live in hard times, man. Like
Yeah.
the economy's not great. Budgets are tight. Entertainment and publishing and entertainment in general is on shaky ground. People have limited budgets. They want to know that, like, if they're going to get an issue of Space Ghost, for example, that they're going to get at least what they expect on the tin. Not to say that we're like trying to cater to, to sort of the lowest common denominator expectations, but just like, if I'm working on a book called Space Ghost, I'm going to make sure that I give you a Space Ghost adventure with Space Ghost month in and month out. And I want to make sure I earn your trust every month. I will work my ass off to make sure that I earn that trust, because I know how easy it is to lose it. And I think that's something that, and it's difficult. We work in monthly comics. The pacing is brutal, to say the
Mhm.
least. We never get as much runway as we would like. I certainly never have. It's, but I do think that sometimes, with respect, sometimes we are quick to pretend that our well-intentioned, but our failures don't hold weight, that we try to move on from them as fast as possible. And sometimes I think we need to kind of have a good long look in the mirror and say, like, but if we've broken trust, how do we rebuild it? And I think that's sort of something that's an existential threat for the industry.
Mhm.
Is something that I think we all have to kind of focus on. And there are plenty of creators who are doing really good work of their careers. And month in and month out, they're showing that they got the chops, that they got the goods. And so I think it's just something that we have to kind of keep doing. I think it's something we especially need to do with sort of our marquee characters, the ones that are sort of our ambassadors to the rest of the comics reading fandom, to the rest of culture, to the rest of the world. They say, like, the comics industry doesn't survive without a strong Marvel or a strong DC. That's a tough road to hoe when you're also operating within 60 years of continuity. Uh,
Mhm.
so it's easy for me to say, because I get to play around with Space Ghost and Speed Racer, where there is cool continuity that nobody else has touched. So I don't want to pretend like I have all the answers. I certainly don't. I'm only one journeyman creator. But I could say, as a journeyman creator who with a limited sphere of influence, all I can do is sort of write my books in a way that every issue hopefully will feel like it's worth your money, that I'm packing in as much story as I can within an inch of its life, because I want to make sure that when you're paying your, $3.99 or $4.99, that you're getting your money's worth, because you could be spending your money doing literally anything else. Um, uh, if you're gonna take a chance on me, I want to make sure that I'm giving it 110%. So, and whether that's at the direct market, whether that's on Kickstarter, this industry probably will drive me to an early grave. But that's kind of the thing about making art, is that, like, if I ever sort of wake up someday and just sort of see this as like, I'm just churning something out, I'm just doing the thing. Unless it's just an assignment that didn't, break in my favor, in which case you should pity me, because those are tough assignments to slog through. But if I'm purposefully, like, just kind of phoning it in, like, put a fork in me, I'm done. Like, this is my astronaut job. This is the job I wake up every day grateful to be able to do. I get to, create things in my chosen medium, with these amazing characters that, allows me to tap into something larger than myself and the larger culture, and seeing the response of these fans and being able to connect with strangers all around the world who feel something based on my work. I can't imagine a more exciting calling than that. And that's the sort of thing that really inspires me to try to get up every day and deliver my A game, because it sure beats digging ditches.
Yes, indeed. And you know what? You deliver every time.
Well, thank you.
There's no doubt about that. From your superhero work that we've seen with Marvel to what we've seen with Space Ghost and Speed Racer, and we can't recommend those enough, because they're not just adaptations from what we see on the small screen. They're real stories that connect on every single level. And then to flip something like the OZ, which you are blending so many myths together and themes, and really coming up with something truly original, and something that really gives you more than just a normal story. And that's the one thing that connects with me, especially as a reader. And I know it connects with everybody else that we've talked to about it, because when you drop an issue, no matter what it is, it has fans talking, but it's based on the quality of work that you put in every single time. And the OZ has been worth the wait. This is why fans have been waiting 4 years, chomping at every single bit to say, when is it going on Kickstarter? And June 8th is the day.
Yes.
And can't scream it enough from wherever we are standing, whether you're watching on YouTube, whether you're catching in this podcast form. Make sure you go over, click on that link, go support this campaign, go support David, because he's literally giving you everything he's got, and it shows up in every single book that he writes, and you don't want to miss this. David, we can't thank you enough for breaking away from your schedule to talk to us. We definitely have to catch up with you a little later this year.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time, and thank you for all the kind words about my work, and for everyone watching. Thank you so much for supporting Space Ghost and Speed Racer, and I hope you'll check out the OZ. If you missed our previous 2 campaigns, like I said, we're gonna have print and digital catch-up tiers, so you can get the whole thing. Or if you only missed one of the campaigns, we'll have on a la carte add-on options, so you can get one issue or the other. Yeah, this is sort of the perfect time. If you're curious about any of my work, we're going to have all of it on offer. But the OZ is really, I think it's some of my best work. It's beautifully drawn. I think it's worth the price point, and it's certainly going to be worth the wait. So definitely check us out, tinyurl.com/the OZ comic. That'll take you straight to our Kickstarter page. If you sign up for this, this will already be up by the time this interview goes live. But yeah, if you sign up for the Kickstarter, if you've never done a Kickstarter before, I'll let you know. If we don't make our goal, you don't get charged a dime. But anybody who backs the campaign, particularly within the first 48 hours, that's so important. The first 48 hours are what bumps us up in Kickstarter's algorithm. So any donation is not even the right word, because this is not a charity. This is a storefront. The book is done. Any contribution helps. We will be getting you rewards very, very quickly. I talked about this actually before we started recording. Not only are we working with Comic Impressions, our printer, who to the first 2 issues so they know how this book is supposed to look. We are working with the amazing team at Laguna Studios for fulfillment. So as soon as the Kickstarter is done, as soon as the money's been dispersed, I can call the printer, tell them exactly what to print, send it to Laguna Studios. I will send any books on my stock to them directly. And as soon as the books arrive in their hands, they will have everything shipped in 2 to 3 weeks. So we have right now a holiday deadline on our Kickstarter. We'd like to get everything in your hands before then. However, I would anticipate, barring any sort of act of God emergency that is way out of my hands, you're going to get your books well before that.
And I'm excited for that. I will be purchasing. I know Ken will be purchasing,
yes.
and you should also be purchasing as well.
Exactly. So on behalf of David, Rich, and myself, thank you again for checking out another edition of Fanlight Zone Presents. We'll see you next time.
Thank you, guys.